This is Midrash Tanchuma, Parshat Vaera. The Midrash deals a lot with signs because both the stick that turns into a snake as well as the plagues are all signs. They're sending messages to multiple people at the same time, each with a targeted message and all happening simultaneously. Now, the Midrash asks, is it okay to ask for a sign? And it seems that it is okay. Even Noah asked for a sign to know that God was not going to destroy the world. And the sign he got, of course, was the rainbow. My father, Alav Shalom, had said that the rainbow was sort of a non-aggression pact that God was showing the world because it was a bow without an arrow. In any case, let's talk more about what the symbolism of the snake turning into a staff. So the Midrash says that the first signal was actually to Moshe himself, that he was supposed to know that Paro will deal treacherously in all the negotiations, and indeed he did. Remember the first time that Moshe and Aaron went to see him, he denied the existence of God and then turned around and made the Jews gather the straw so that their work was far more difficult. And of course, he was trying to drive a wedge between the Jewish people and their new revolutionary leaders. And he did indeed drive a wedge. So that was one symbol of the staff turning into a snake. Another one was the fact that Paro bragged how he was going to kill Moshe, and then when he was in the same company as Moshe, he was like a staff. He was mum, never made those threats in front of Moshe. And yet another one was about the treachery of the whole Egyptian court system and justice system, that they kill people without any due process. They're a snake. Of course, the second time that Moshe and Aaron came to see Pharaoh, so they each threw down their staff and it turned into snakes. But when it was all over, when the contest was over, the staff, not the snake, the staff of Aaron consumed all the other staffs, dozens of staffs. Now this sent a very targeted message to Pharaoh. Why? I believe it's because the most frightening part of his own dream, the dream that Yosef interpreted, was that skinny cows ate fat cows, something very unlikely. So here you have this miracle that this staff consumed dozens of the staffs from all the people that worked with Pharaoh, the witchcraft and all those people, and yet the staff was no thicker. It wasn't like a snake that had a big bulge in the middle showing what he just ate for lunch. The staff was the same size, but it ate everyone else's. So that was a particular message. In fact, Pharaoh got the message. He said, wow, I bet you if you told the staff to consume me and my throne, it would do so. So he got the message, but it was obviously quickly forgotten because you don't see anything in his later behavior which showed that he saw the power of God. Okay, so speaking of the power of God, let's talk about the plagues. What was the messages? So again, multiple messages. The world saw the power of God. The Jewish people saw how their oppressors were being punished, so that there was a love that grew between the Jewish people and God, and faith in God. And then, of course, the Egyptians were being punished, but not, according to the Midrash, just punished for the sake of punishment. It was, as the Midrash so often says, midah keneged midah. Every single one of the plagues had to do with some kind of humiliation that the Jews had to go through. In other words, the Midrash is telling a very different story than perhaps you might think from just reading the Chumash. That it's not so much that the Jews were going through tremendous hard labor and hardships, which they were. But what the Midrash focuses on, especially for the lesson of Mida Kedeged Mida, measure for measure, it was the humiliation. Every one of the plagues was supposed to send a message also to the Egyptians saying, and having them recognize the humiliation that they caused the Jewish people to suffer, and give them a chance to repent, to grow from that, perhaps to see that the Jewish God was a God that, was so much more just than their idol worship. So let's go through some of them. The first one, of course, is dam, and the Midrash says it has to do with dam nida. In other words, women who were menstruating were not allowed to go to the mikveh. They weren't allowed to go in any place, any river. And of course, we know that Batya, the daughter of Paro, went to the Nile River, and the Jewish women were not allowed to go there. Specifically, the Nile River was banned from that, and because of that humiliation, which by the way was sort of a forced birth control, because people wouldn't have sexual relations with their spouse if the wife was Anita. So it's interesting, the many sources that say the Nile was the god of fertility. So that would be a perfect Mida Kedeged Mida kind of punishment. But of course, the life of the Egyptians, although they're trying to make the home life of a Jew miserable, their entire life of the Egyptians was turned upside down because, of course, as everybody learned as a kid, that that's not just the Nile that turned into blood, but also every cup of water. They couldn't bathe, they couldn't drink, they couldn't wash their clothes. And then all the rest of them also fall in line. It's all about humiliation. Tzfardea, they made the Jews go capture reptiles for them, which wasn't something maybe they needed, but just for degradation. And so they got Tzfardea. And the same thing with the Kinim. They had to sweep the sidewalks, and then eventually that dust turned into lice. And wild animals, they sent the Jewish slaves to go capture wild animals. Some say actually they made them sort of like the gladiators. The Roman gladiators had to fight with the animals in public, and then the animals attacked Egyptians. And the same thing with the crops, and any kind of crops, that involves the dever and the barad and the arbe, all that, whenever they had to pick crops, which was perhaps not necessary, again, humiliating, and so they were punished by having these crops destroyed. And even the boils, the skin, they made the Jews soothe their skin with ointments, and then they got these boils, which, of course, was nothing that you could soothe. You couldn't ever be comfortable when you had these boils. So what is interesting, I was saying before, that it's all Mida Kedeged Mida. There's a famous saying from the Chatam Sofer that one of the reasons that Yisro converted, I'll read it to you in Hebrew, Atayadati Kagadol Hashem Mikol Okim Ki Badavar Asher Zodu Aleim. So he takes this verse to mean that when Yitro realized that the Egyptians actually were punished, Mida Kedeged Mida, and they understood that each one of the plagues was keneged, a form of humiliation that they did to the Jews. Yisro was so impressed with these sort of targeted messages that are meant to help someone learn and grow and do tshuva and change and recognize who the real God was. So that's why he converted. So, as we said, that is really the theme of the Parsha, that this was not random plagues, but all sort of for a reason. And one last thing I want to say is when the Jews realized that God took the trouble to acknowledge their suffering and their humiliation, and the plagues were sort of telling the story of all their humiliation, and the Egyptians were suffering Mida Kedega Mida, and perhaps realizing what they did. This, of course, was also a source of healing for the Jewish people, because their tormentors had to face what they did and absorb the lessons and this kind of sensitivity that God had in making this happen, that their tormentors were acknowledging that they humiliated them, certainly helped with the healing. So that's all part of the beautiful, miraculous story of the plagues. Have a great Shabbos.